Rental cars are a hugely important part of tourism for many, many people, and we're going to hear about accessible rental cars. Campbell McKee is president of the European Mobility Group, which represents vehicle adapters and converters for disabled people across Europe, and which is leading development of international standards in the installation of appropriate driving aids. He's also chairman of Motivation, which is a leading provider of appropriate wheelchairs and related products and services to developing countries. Campbell.
I need a microphone.
Oh, can we have the microphone back? Has somebody run off with it again? Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon. And I think I'm here as the statutory non-Canadian in the panel. And so quite a lot of what I'm talking about is with particular reference to Europe. And just to pick up a point that was made earlier about the 75-25 split between external and internal tourism, vis-a-vis Quebec as against England. Well, in England, you can get from one end of the country to another in about 9 hours driving. Not quite the same in Canada. So let's keep the perspectives. Anyway, accessible car rental and a vital link in accessible tourism. Well, I think it might be a surprising topic for some of you, but let me just put it into context. The power of tourism. And here you can see some happy tourists, and that's why I know they're from Montreal. And the second reason I can see they're happy is, and from Montreal, is they're standing outside a whiskey distillery. Right. So, people travel for many reasons, and there's the Golden Girls and one or two fellas in amongst them. Aging population fast means that accessible tourism is a fast-growing market. I'm going to repeat some of the issues that you've heard at the more general level over the course of the last couple of days. The American companies and tourism companies and many others demand accessible venues and transport. Again, you've heard that. And in Europe, the number of disabled and elderly passengers involved in air travel are increasing at twice the rate of ordinary passengers in air travel. And it's a big financial impact, and you've heard of other studies over the course of the last 2 days. There's a German study in 2008 said that the sales value generated by disabled tourists was around about $3 billion.
Euros.
And well, no, 2.5 billion euros is about $3 billion. The euro is a much stronger currency than the dollar. I just want to put that into context as well, and don't get me on the pound sterling. 65,000 jobs at the moment, and if it really developed, it could be another $5 or $6 billion worth of revenue and 90,000 more jobs. So it's big impact financially. Again, that's repeating what you've heard earlier. So I'm really looking particularly at international travel in the context and tourism within that context. And of course, the US accessibility regulations, they apply to all flights to and from the USA, code shares, all sorts of things. And so Americans are going to expect their ADA standards to apply when they arrive, anywhere in the world. Likewise, cruise ship passengers, we've heard how they're 60 years and above, the vast majority, and many of them do have mobility difficulties. I have an elderly brother and his wife. They love cruising. He is almost blind, and so he feels the comfort and security of being on a cruise ship, and he can't fall off. He knows where he is, and that is typical of passengers. So once you get to the other end, what are your choices? Of course, train, coach, buses, over the roads, whatever you want to call them, they're the preferred choice for many people, particularly on package tourism. But it's not for everyone. Some people are independent. They want the freedom to be able to go to and from wherever they want to go, to make their own personal travel choices. Because that's what makes tourism fun for many people, not to be part of the herd. So, what do they want to do? Taxis is one option, but another one is car rental. So, why would you choose car rental? Well, you don't know how the public transport works in another country. The timetables, the routes, the service may not suit you. You may be going to somewhere where the buses come every second Tuesday and they're full of sheep anyway. Freedom to change your plans, explore the byways. That's what I love to do. Why shouldn't everyone? Sometimes it's more economic if you're a group or a family travelling together. Cheaper than buying rail tickets, especially in our part of Europe. And for some disabled people, there's a greater comfort, sense of comfort perhaps, rather than just comfort. Greater sense of comfort, confidence, dignity may well be appropriate. So, what are the issues of car rental? There's availability of suitable accessible vehicles at airports, termini, or even in the middle of cities. Range of controls for driving, people who want to drive the rental car. Are these features available? The safety and suitability of the adaptations and the bolt-on items. And of course the compatibility of controls and adaptations between different countries. And here you can see just a couple of, the top one is a wheelchair accessible vehicle from Turkey, and I'm not sure where the other one is from. Left-hand drive here, probably Belgium. Just assume it's Belgium. So the types of adaptations really fall into three very, very broad categories. First of all, drive from your own wheelchair. Drive from a wheelchair. Wheelchair accessible vehicles, and we call them WAVs over in our part of the world. WAVs. Get used to that name. It's a handy one if you're looking for such a vehicle. It's a WAV. And the others are, of course, the adapted steering, driving controls, and the various other adaptations that are within a vehicle. So let's just consider these one by one. Drive from a wheelchair. That's wonderful. Wonderful technology, and there's a very good example. Sadly, you can't do it in car rental. It's such a specialized area and such individual situation that it's not an option, I'm afraid. On the other hand, wheelchair accessible vehicles, or WAVs, are commonly available, and these are, as we'll learn later, are adapted either are conversions of existing mainstream vehicles, vans and so on, or actually are factory built and have been for a number of years by people like the Mercedes. Mercedes Vito is a commonly supplied factory conversion, a factory model, which is wheelchair accessible, and the one down below is a Volkswagen Caddy. These have been around for years. And that's one of my nice pictures showing the power of tourism. We're off to the dance, I think, on that one all the way from Netherlands. When we come to driving adaptations, a whole raft of them. Many of you are already familiar. There's push-pull rings on the top right. That's accelerator and braking just by pulling the little ring towards the steering wheel. For drivers with only the use of one arm, a steering ball to facilitate, or perhaps lower arm strength, a steering ball to facilitate the turning of the wheel, left foot accelerator, pedal, and so on. So quite a variety of things, and of course other things like swivel seats to facilitate entry to the vehicle for someone who can transfer or has other form of mobility aid. And that can apply to a driving position as well as to a passenger position. You have to understand that some of these may have been taken in British cars which have the wheel on the correct side of the vehicle. Thank you for that. It was Napoleon who changed it and got it wrong. But there are quite a number of other secondary adaptations, and of course, where do you put a folded wheelchair, hoists, and so on. I'm not going to go into every one of them. But the range of controls and adaptations, the availability of a suitable vehicle is going to be very limited depending where you go. And even if you do an advance booking through a fly drive package, you're reliant on the partner within that package to get the right vehicle to you at the airport. And if your a vehicle to your specification isn't available and you've already made the flight, that has ruined your entire trip, absolutely. There's the safety and suitability. Many of the controls, of course, have to be tailored to the individual. Unfamiliar controls, especially with right-hand drive vehicles, if you're not used to that, they can be dangerous without assessment and guidance. And simple bolt-on hand controls, which some of the major rental companies provide, can be highly dangerous. There's no real checks on their suitability. Availability. Some countries have a legal requirement on rental companies to provide accessible vehicles. Not every country in Europe. I think it applies in the USA, correct me on that one. But the reality in practice is often very different. Lack of available vehicles, as we've said, suitable vehicles, and additional charges sometimes apply compared to other people. And this little story here, I will read a simplified version of this. This is verbatim from an Italian colleague of mine who converts vehicles, provides equipment right across southern Europe. And he said he's been supplying Hertz, Avis and so on many times with completely adapted vehicles, but after a while the equipment has been taken off the vehicles. Why? Because the rental companies say there's not enough turnover to support having an adapted car permanently available. So they then modified their approach and went for quick release equipment that could be bolted on, so that the rental company could take off the adaptation, the driving controls, and use the car for another passenger who was able-bodied. But that situation was even worse because the rental car companies didn't want to reinstall the equipment in case they got it wrong, as they often did, and that created risk problems for the user. And he pointed out there was only one market, in effect, where having disabled rental cars, if I can call them that, where it really worked. And that's a holiday set of islands just off the coast of Africa, European islands, on the Canary Islands, Lanzarote, Las Palmas, and so on, because every day of the year is a tourist day. And so they get plenty of British, German, Swiss, and so on using these vehicles. And that's a very good market for disabled tourists rattling in and wanting to rent cars. So that's the sort of reality of the situation. In terms of compatibility, we have no real international standards. We've heard a lot about standardization today and yesterday, no real standards. There's such a large range of hand controls, it's very difficult to avoid being design restrictive on doing so, because your need is different from your need. Safety standards do vary from country to country. Inspection, testing regimes and so on for vehicles and the equipment also are different, and many countries don't even check the vehicles once they've been modified. So, parking badges. No, there is no universal worldwide recognition of parking badges for people with disabilities. We think there is, and then in practice we find there isn't. In Europe we have reciprocal agreements on this. Don't work all the time. They vary in interpretation, they vary within a country. We have one situation within England where one authority does not recognize parking badges from elsewhere in the country. So if we take it outside Europe and look even wider, we have an even bigger gap and problem. So application is very patchy. So, and there are even restrictions on who can rent. Well, I'm not sure what age he is at the time of taking the photograph. He may have gone on, as we say. But many countries perhaps won't rent a car to anyone over 70 years old. And that, again, limits the availability. And some countries don't even let wheelchair users drive a vehicle at all, whether rented or not. The major rental companies do recognize there's a market. Many of them offer bolt-on driving aids. They do have wheelchair accessible vehicles. They do have WAVs on offer, and that's not really a major problem, but the driving controls is a different thing. And there is a company that supplies supplies a lot of these rental companies with hand controls that can be bolted on, and subject to the sort of issues we talked about. But you are dependent on the individual fella or lady at the desk. And you've got to give 24 or 48 hours notice, or longer in some cases, to apply for that. Do try the thrifty desk at the far end of the Palais de Congrès and just check out how the situation works. On the other hand, there are smaller rental companies, and I've picked out two Allied Vehicles. I know them well. They're based in Glasgow, Scotland, and they are a major converter of vehicles across Europe, but in UK they have 134 WAVs, 30 cars that can be adapted for drivers, and they're freely available, and they know what they're talking about. They can listen to the needs and identify what these needs are. Paravan, a German company, does supply people like Avis a lot of rental cars, and they're sitting happily very close to Frankfurt Airport to be able to offer the service and give the personal attention. And there's one from the little town of Lund in Sweden, near Malmo, and it's just a vehicle that looks like any other vehicle, of course. Volkswagen Caddy, as I mentioned. And I represent the mobility group, European Mobility Group, which is an association of the companies who adapt vehicles for disabled drivers as well as WAVs. And we are working hard now to develop standards and make this sort of information as to who can provide rental cars for people with disabilities available on our website. And of course, it's not all negative. People do come, and repeat customers come because this is the kind of service they want. So, thank you very much. The details of our association can be found on our website.
Quick questions for Campbell. Yes, gentleman here.
Okay, is it on?
Yep, I think so. Oh, you switched it off. That's right.
First of all, Mr. Campbell, thank you for this presentation. It's really enlightening. With the arrival of Google autonomous cars, I don't suppose there's any plans to include car rental of autonomous driving cars. I'd like to have your opinion on that. Is it in any future plans that we could see it?
Okay, good question.
As with anything else on Google, you take your chances on what you're looking at. You have to use your own discretion on what you read and make your own conclusions. Our plan is, and I've only held this meeting 1 week ago in Netherlands with my colleagues in the mobility group, and we are planning to put our available information onto our website within the near future as to which companies we know are able, at the local level, are able to supply adapted or vehicles for rental. And that is, if you like, a public service that we can offer, because we are able to, through our association, to indicate the quality of service. And it's more about the customer service than it is about the hardware. Let's be honest, what you really want is somebody who understands your individual needs and can translate that into a solution.
I think nonetheless it's a question we need to put to Google. Lady right here. It is on, I think.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your website, because I used to travel a lot. I visited more than 30 different countries approximately, and I can't imagine to visit a country without renting my own car, because I like to have freedom, and it's exactly what you said. We don't know exactly the transport, what can we take for the transportation when you arrive, and it was very, very hard. I retried during many years to find solution to rent cars when I go to different country, because I try to contact Avis, Hertz, different agency. They always say me exactly what you said. There is not enough demands for that, and they can give me any solution. So I hope you will you will grow up quickly because it's a really good initiative. And for me, as the only things that I have tried to do, the only solutions that I found, it was to ask a an international drive license. And I bought an equipment in California, and I just need of an automatic car. It's more easier to find, but I can't find in our country because in America or UK it's easier to find an automatic car, but in France, for example, and many different countries like in Spain or East Europe, it's really hard to find. So I really hope you will grow up.
If you have any information you want to give me as well, that would be grateful. I have to say that the initiative for creating this for our website has only come because of coming to Montreal and preparing a paper on this subject. I found what I couldn't find and then went to the industry to start talking about what we need to offer. So this conference has helped me get into this subject, and it's a work in progress, but we have the goal now and a lot of enthusiasm from the conversion industry to be able to take this forward for the good of our users, or the customers.
Okay, I'm going to take one last quick question before we move on to the last speaker. Yes.
Bring your own bolt on. Legal, not legal?
I would have said not legal, wouldn't you?
Strictly speaking, not legal. I think you're taking your chance, but you are taking your chance. How the insurers would look at you in the event of something going wrong and you have not notified the car rental company, oh boy.
So better to document the notification.
Yes, it might end up as a refusal.